create all this paper and digital currency, if you will, imagining that it's precious metals, gold or silver, but it's not. And that's how they rig the price.
Do you think the price of gold and silver are manipulated, maybe even rigged? That's a subject of great debate within the precious metals field, shrouded in mystery and intrigue. Well, today we're joined by Stuart Englert. He wrote a book on the subject. It's called Rigged: Exposing the Largest Financial Fraud in History.
You've heard this saying that gold is kryptonite to the dollar. Like I think kryptonite was what could hurt Superman, if I have it right. It really is. And you touched on that, and I think that's so important for people to understand that. And I think this is part of the manipulation, or the cause behind the manipulation is that they're in competition. Let me ask you your opinion on this. I have a theory, or a way I like to explain it. 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, right? If you look at that like a divorce, right? When a couple gets divorced, they don't generally wish well to the other party involved, right? And another way to look at it is, like, if I own a stock in a company that I believed in, and then, the narrative changes, so I sell the stock, I'll be honest, I don't want to check it out a month later and see that it doubled in price, right? And I mean, isn't that the same with the US government and the US dollar? Potentially, right? But when they divorce the dollar from gold, they don't want gold to do well. Yeah, I think, like you said, because if gold does well, that makes the dollar, it's a different story when the dollar's backed by gold, but once they're divorced from each other, they're in competition. Is that a fair way to say it?
We'd like to thank our sponsor, First Mining Gold. They're a Canadian gold developer with 2 world-class projects in Canada. They also have a handful of other projects. When you total up all the gold in their resources, it comes to over 12 million ounces. They're worth checking out. I'll put a link to the company's website in the description below.
Absolutely. They are competitors. The bottom line is money has been and always will be, I guess, a confidence game. And once you lose confidence or faith in a currency, it's worth less. That's where that term comes from, worth less. Because we're on this fiat debt-based currency standard now, the dollar continues to depreciate, as do all fiat currencies around the world.
Whoa, Stuart. What are you talking about? The dollar's depreciating? I just read the other day, it's only gone down like 96% since 2013. What are you talking about?
I've heard 97 or 98%. So,
well, see, we don't get along. Let's end this interview right now. Sorry to interrupt you. I won't do it again.
Not a problem. It's being debased. Yeah. But that's exactly why they've had to, the powers that be. We're including the U.S. government, the central banks, Western central banks, the bullion banks. That's why they've had to suppress the price, because as the dollar loses value, people turn to precious metals. And if they can subdue the rising price of precious metals, not as many people will flee or exchange their depreciating dollars for precious metals. And that's why they've had to do it. And, it used to be that the central banks would just dump gold onto the market to suppress its price. But they got to a point where they were going to run out of gold to do that. So nowadays they do it primarily in the futures market, on the COMEX and the LBMA, which is the London Bullion exchange over in London. And they trade these artificial contracts, if you will, imaginary metal futures contracts.
My viewers get a kick out of when I call those unicorn fart dust. So make believe.
Imagine
say,
they trade all this paper and digital currency, if you will, imagining that it's precious metals, gold or silver, but it's not. And
right.
that's how they rig the price. And they do it in such large volume that even if there's a rising demand for physical metals, they can drive the price down by trading all these paper contracts. And as you call it, unicorn farts, is that what they are?
Unicorn fart dust is the proper term. That's going to be in my book, but my book's decades out in the future. Yeah, they can overwhelm it, right? They can overwhelm the physical demand. And you talk about this. I want to, I don't know that we're doing your book justice. I want to mention this now, guys. Great book. He lays it out in simple terms, right? Would you say that you did your best to make it understandable for the average person? Simple terms, how this manipulation goes on.
That's was one of my goals. When I wrote this book, I wanted to write it for the layman. A lot of people get overwhelmed with all the technology and complex language on this subject. And so I did my very best to use language that I thought people could understand. And even if I used technical terms, I tried my best to translate that, if you will, for the average person. I also tried to keep the book very concise because, a lot of people don't want to read a big academic tome on this subject. They want something they can read in a couple of hours, and you can read my book in a couple of hours if you'd like. And but no, that was my intent. I didn't want this just for the insiders. I wanted the average person to be able to pick it up and glean some information and insight and enlightenment on this subject.
And I just so all my viewers know, I read it, I understood it, and if I can understand it, most likely everybody can understand it. I mean, it is a well-written book, and it covers all the bases. So kudos to you. You did a great job.
I appreciate that endorsement, Ron. I really do. Thanks.
Yeah. So gold and silver. Let's talk. As we look at what's going on in the world right now, I want to get your opinion. We have, and I think Goldman Sachs has recognized this. I've heard even, JP Morgan Chase, even they've recognized this, that there's a movement toward de-dollarization, right? There's the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and a host of other countries that are kind of binding together in the East. There's what appears to be a movement away from the dollar. Now, I want to bring this back to gold and silver. And boy, I don't want to be too complicated, but there's this concept called Exter's pyramid, which basically says it's an inverted pyramid, and at the base, gold and silver are the base of all money. There's paper money, electronic money, debt, everything, derivatives stacked on top of that. Do you think, I want to get your opinion on this, that as the world de-dollarizes, right, in the world, and we're already seeing this movement back, natural movement back to silver and gold, which have always been money. But do you think as all these geopolitical, all these monetary changes are going on in the world, up there in that pyramid is the US dollar. But also up in that pyramid are the euro and the yen, that as things move back to gold, if there's a movement away from the US dollar, it's not like the euro is going to become the new world reserve currency, or the yen is going to become the new world reserve currency. It feels, because they're in the same boat or worse than we are, it feels like it's a natural progression back towards gold and silver, which we're starting to see. And even if these BRICS countries do what they say they're going to do and start a new world reserve currency, it's likely, they say, to be backed by real assets, which of course would include silver and gold. It seems like we're heading to back to silver and gold, no matter how you slice it or dice it. Does that make sense at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that the precious metals are the backstop. They underlie really all the other currencies and debt. They always have. They always will. And the dollar's supremacy is being challenged along with these other fiat currencies. We see that happening. What's going on in Ukraine? The U.S. officials like to claim that it's all about freedom and democracy, but I think what's going on in Ukraine is much bigger. I think it has to do with world domination and supremacy, and that includes the power and the currencies that are out there.
Sure.
We know that Russia has dumped its U.S. debt. Okay, did that several years ago, and China is gradually reducing their holdings of U.S. securities. And meanwhile, what are they doing? They're accumulating gold and silver along with dozens of other countries around the world. They see the writing on the wall. They see what's coming. And as has been reported just here in the last month or so, the world's central banks purchased a record amount of gold last year. I think it was 1,136 tons. And that's a record going back at least to the 1950s. It may be before that. But that tells me that they know something is wrong with the existing debt-based monetary system, and they're accumulating it to protect themselves.
And you said 1,136 tons of gold?
That's the number that the World Gold Council reported last month. Yes.
Okay. And I just want to tell my viewers, if they want to get a visual of what that looks like, in a video I'll make next week, I'll show them my gold stash I have over in the corner. I wish. Here's what I do want to say on a serious note about that. Think about this. Everybody watching this video, think about this. The world central banks bought a record amount of gold last year. And the last time they bought that amount of gold and that volume of gold, probably the 50s or the 60s, right? We know that to be true, right? In the 50s and 60s, the world was on the gold standard. I know that doesn't mean we're on the gold, but I'm just saying, the fact that they bought that much gold, and the last time they did was, I think that's a key point, and I don't hear many people talking about it. I mean, that tells me that gold, and by default, gold's little cousin, I like to call it silver, are becoming much more important in the world from a monetary or from a value perspective. Why else are all these world central banks buying all this gold?
And what are they buying it with? They're buying it with the fiat currencies, okay?
Right.
Which are losing value. They're exchanging money that is depreciating with money that they hope is going to appreciate or protect or preserve their nation's wealth.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to point out, and I think that, and I don't know how you can share with me your feelings on this. I think a lot of gold and silver enthusiasts get really scared and even have a feeling of disdain when the subject of electronic gold is brought up, because the first thing they think of is the COMEX and the LBMA. But I want to look at electronic gold, and I want to get your thoughts on this from a monetary transaction perspective, that as we do, if this does continue, if the trend continues back toward gold and silver becoming or regaining that they never really lost, but regaining their overall stature of the store of value or re-recognition of it, that as transactions need to occur throughout the world, right, on a personal level, on a business level, we're going to need some form of electronic gold. And I know there are things out there, right? I'm not an expert in the field, but there's UPMA, there's Kinesis money. But even on a larger scale, we're going to need electronic gold. And I think that scares a lot of people. And they think, they think of crypto, or they think of the LBMA and the COMEX. But what I'm talking about are products that are regulated, that are audited, that there's electronic representations of gold, that it's 100% assured represent actual physical metal somewhere in a vault, and that can then be used. Do you what, any thoughts on that? I'll shut my mouth.
I have mixed feelings on this whole thing because, we have a digital currency now, if you will. Most of the transactions that occur digitally. When we use a credit card, that's a digital transaction. Even our checks go through an electronic exchange. So we have that now. The question is, who's going to run this system? Is it going to be reputable? Is it going to be reliable? Is it going to have backing? And that's the problem when you talk about money is the scam artists always come in and they try to exploit it. Every aspect of it, whether it's a fiat currency or a cryptocurrency or a digital currency or even a paper currency. I mean, that's what counterfeiting, is all about. So, I think you're absolutely right. At some point, there's going to have to be digital gold, if you will, digital units that are backed by precious metals. And
they got it.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but they got to be backed. They've got to be, and there has to be a 100% assurance that it's there and it's real, right? Sorry to interrupt you.
The problem is we can't even get an audit of the United States gold holding. So how are we going to get an audit of anything else? That's the skepticism I have. Stephen Mnuchin, the former Treasury Secretary, went to Fort Knox back during the lunar eclipse. I think it was in 2017, and he tweeted out, "Gold is safe." Well, what the heck does that mean? He said on Bloomberg News that it hadn't been audited since the 1950s, and then we can't even get Congress to audit the Federal Reserve to know if they're swapping and leasing, our gold if it's been encumbered. So, I just don't have a whole lot of trust in these governmental systems. Because there's a whole lot of graft that goes on there and a whole lot of propaganda.
So most likely we aren't going to be relying on the U.S. government to give us a gold-backed electronic form.
and then can we rely on private entities to do that? I mean, look at FTX. This crypto exchange, which was just a complete scam. And the same thing can happen with these supposed gold and silver-backed currencies. They can be run by scam artists. And so you have to do your due diligence. You have to do your research, and you can't just trust it at face value. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, well, no, and that's a great point. I mean, it comes back, right? If I don't hold it, I don't really own it. But there is potential there. This the way I see it. There is potential that if there is a reputable, trustable form, whether I don't know, who knows where, but if it does come about, if the need is created by the market because the fiat currencies all are losing their value, that the need is created for something maybe more robust than what the electronic options that we have now, and it is trusted and it is used, it could create massive demand because it would have to be backed by real metal in order to be trusted and reputable. Could, and maybe I'm just a silver and gold dreamer, but could create super robust demand for the metals as the world moves back there. Now, the other side of that coin is if the BRICS countries do come out with a reserve currency and they do back it with silver and gold. I mean, we've heard what the leaders of Russia and China have said and remarks they've made about their frustration with the prices of silver and gold. I mean, that could to a certain degree do it as well, right? I mean, it could create even competition if that makes sense. I don't know. Like I said, I'm off in the clouds to a certain extent, but I do think when I look at what's going on out there geopolitically and this movement back towards silver and gold, I don't know. I feel comfortable holding the precious metals.